Hi there, everybody. This is Wendy Hernandez, and welcome back for another episode of the Family Law Insider podcast. Today, I have with me a creative thought leader, an author, a keynote speaker, a blogger for the Huffington Post, and a lifestyle leader. My guest today is Joan Frances Moran, and we're going to talk about addiction in the context of relationships, but also about surrendering and letting go. Joan has a lot of experience in these areas. She's going to share them with us and share some ideas to help you. So welcome, Joan, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon.
Thanks, Joan. So, Joan, as I was sharing with you earlier, I'm a family law attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. And so, naturally, I'm dealing with a lot of people whose relationships are ending. On top of that, I have a lot of friends who are in and out of relationships. And one thing that's interesting to me that I see a lot is people who are in these relationships that are toxic, where they're mistreated and abused, yet they can't let go and they don't want to let go. They keep going back to the partner. And it seems kind of like an addiction to me. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, and what's your experience?
I think that codependency in relationships is very common. I don't think I've ever encountered a male or a female that hasn't been in that kind of addiction context when they are in a relationship and it's breaking up or it's not working. Because you always feel that the next day is going to be better and better and better. It's like women who keep going back to abusive mates. And
Yes.
and even though there's not physical abuse, a lot of times there's mental abuse. So there's an addiction, there's an attraction there, and it's sort of you have your heart in the right place, but at the end of the day, it's a codependent relationship, and it is not very healthy. So that you have to recognize that first, come to recognition first, and after that, you have to be brave and take that risk and do the separation, surrender, accept what is, and that relationship might not be that relationship you had hoped it would be.
So, how can somebody tell? Are there clues or signposts that might tell somebody, I'm in a codependent relationship? Yeah.
You keep going back to the person for validation. I think that's the word I was searching for. You want to be validated all the time by the person that you're living with. Is this okay? Do I look good? Can you tell me how good I look today? And or you say, well, what are we going to have for dinner? You just keep throwing things at a person, and it gets to be very, very dependent, and it gets to be habitual. And the habitual behavior becomes the codependent behavior. So you don't even, unfortunately, you're unconscious about this behavior. You're not in the present. You're in the past or you're in the future, but you're not now. You're not in the now. If you were in the now, you might realize that you're crowding each other with this kind of conversation and that you need to let each other go and be in a relationship, and that's the healthiest relationship.
Okay, so I want to delve a little more deeply into that distinction about if you're in this relationship, you're not in the now, you're in the past. So when you say that, what do you mean exactly?
Well, we are conditioned by our past behavior. So when you first got married and you were so close and tight and you went back and forth with each other and you were like dependent on each other's responses, well, that's what you knew in the past, and you keep going into that relationship, into that codependence, whereas you've probably grown apart a little bit, which is good. You probably don't need each other in that needy way anymore. A couple of calls a day might just do it. But when one or the other begins to get crowded by that neediness, it becomes claustrophobic. And so it's not present. It's really reacting from past behavior. Or you try something new, and this is the future, it's going to be this way, but chances are, like addiction, you keep falling back into past behaviors. So here's my suggestion. You can't really do a whole lot with cognitive behavioral changes. Each person has to get to know themselves first. I can give you an example of my son and daughter-in-law. You don't know them,
Please.
so it's
Please.
fine. And this I thought worked really well. Marriage wasn't going well. I call them the Bickersons. They were completely at each other's throats morning, noon, and night. He was working way too hard. He wasn't paying any attention to her, and she was trying to get on her feet and find her identity, and they had 2 children. And in order for them to even have a chance of staying together, she separated. She went to an apartment and came over every morning, did her motherly deeds. They were cordial to each other, and they stopped fighting. So they separated so that they wouldn't get in each other's faces and nag at each other. Then, about 6 months later, she said she was going to renew the lease on the apartment, and I said to her, maybe it's time to go back. Oh, meanwhile, they were both in individual therapy. They weren't in couples therapy yet, but they were individual therapy, getting to know each other, getting to know themselves very well. Why was my son shut down emotionally? Why was she so needy about having to have things and material things that weren't coming to her? Yes. What did she lack? All of this is about lacking instead of abundance. You're lacking something, so I want it. But it's really, you should focus on one should think about the abundance of life instead of what lacks in life. Well, anyway, she finally did not go another 3 months. She finally came home in 6 months.
Okay.
And then they finally started couples therapy. But you have to get to know yourself before you start to change behavior.
Got it. Okay, that's a great example. And was it your feeling, Joan, that this individual discovery helped them when they came back together? Did it help the relationship?
It helped the relationship. And I will say that after a year of that, a year and a little bit more of that coming together, they still go to therapy together. They still go to therapy separately. Because what one expects in a marriage, one does not usually get. And so unrealistic expectations. And so she's working on unrealistic expectations, and he's working on saying how he feels instead of bottling it up. And they still have issues. And they are both, I notice a lot less yelling in the house. I notice a lot less blame in the house. So it's working, but it's a work, as my son says, we're a work in progress.
So we all are works in progress. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I work every day to try to surrender and accept where I am, to understand how my journey is going on. I try not to live in any sort of past life. I've had a great life, so that I'm now in the present, working on my present and moving on to a new future.
Okay. So thank you for that. And so you said something about lack and abundance that I really want to get into a little more, and as it relates to a person who might be or suspect that they're codependent or that the partner is codependent. How did the ideas that you mentioned about wanting more and living in lack, how do they apply to being in a relationship where you feel like you need that other person? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, in a way. I think I have to approach it a little bit differently. We, in our 20s, when we're married in our 20s, it's very young, and we really don't know who we are. So we want. I want this man to adore me. I want this man to be 24/7 with me. That's unrealistic in this day and age. It's an unrealistic expectation, and if both people are working, I think it's almost healthy, because they're both on career tracks, and that takes up an awful lot of energy. But when they get back together again, that energy kind of sours if you're expecting at the end of the day that that man is going to give you what you want, and you feeling bad, and you're making dinner and it's not working. You know, he's not paying enough attention to you. But all this is growing pains. All this is growing up. If you get married later, and I told my sons they could not get married until they were 30. One almost made it, but the other one, because I didn't believe, and even then I would adjust that age, because I don't think you know yourself. Yeah. And they actually both agree with me that I was right on, and maybe they should have taken a little more time, because it makes the marriage very difficult. The honeymoon's over really fast. Right. So then you're stuck together, you're trying to have a conversation, and then the baby comes along and it's happiness, 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 and then they get distracted for many years, and then all of a sudden they find that they don't have what it takes to hold themselves together.
Right.
So we're always in process. Never goals, but we're always in process in our own lives as single people like myself, or as a couple. And I had a marriage of 18 years, and I had a relationship of 16 years throughout my life, a significant other, and it was a terrifically wonderful relationship. The second. The first, I was way too young. I got married at 20, and it was just, a disaster in my 20s. But if I had to do it over, I wouldn't do it over that way. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't fair to me. But the significant other relationship was a working partner relationship as writers and screenwriters, and it was a working partner relationship and letting each other go and experience and go on the adventure. So I could go on my adventure, and I didn't need him to be on my adventure, and he could go on his adventure, and he didn't need me to go on his adventure. So we were much more mature in letting go.
So when you say that you could go on your adventure and he could go on his adventure, are you talking about when the relationship ended?
No, this is in the relationship. I developed a passion for yoga, and I developed a passion for dancing Argentine tango, and those were mine. And he'd say, go to Buenos Aires. Goodbye, go, get out of here.
Wow.
And he was one of those guys. He was a Zen guy. He just lived in the moment, and he wasn't dependent and codependent on me. And what he gave me was from his heart and soul and mind, and what I gave him was the exact same thing. And there was a total respect for each other's beings, each other's personages.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And did you guys ever get into, because I've had clients and friends who say, well, I have my soccer league, and I play soccer every Thursday night, but my wife never comes out to watch me play soccer. She doesn't go to any of my games, and I don't feel supported. I don't feel like she's interested in anything that I have, going. So I hear that, but then on the other hand, I might be hearing the woman or the wife saying, I'm not interested, I won't have fun. So how do you reconcile those two things, Joan? Letting the person have the adventure yet not seeming disinterested.
I didn't ask my significant to come and watch me dance tango when I went out 4 and 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
And that wasn't, no, because he's secure enough to know that I can do things by myself. I don't need him to watch me. And I don't need him to ogle me on the, while I dance with other men. And he was completely secure with me. I think that a guy who says she doesn't support my soccer game or basketball league needs to get a grip.
Okay, thank you.
Say that, but I think he needs to get a grip. I think he needs to know that that's his, not hers, and enjoy it and embrace it and do it, and she doesn't have to be there. Okay. And she might be in a sewing club. Who knows?
Yeah. How much fun would it be for him to go watch her and sew or knit, right?
Or her book club. Get a book club,
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people don't have the patience for that. Yeah. So, I think that's all part of maturation, and that's codependence. Right there, that man saying that is codependent. I need my wife there to adore me. No, you don't. You just need to play the game and stay in the game.
Okay, so, and that goes back to 1, mindfulness, and 2, I guess, kind of knowing yourself and being secure with who you are. Yes? No?
Couples have a real problem have self-identified. I see it all the time. Their self-identification is not strong. It gets weaker and weaker. In fact, I was just having a talk about this with a client, my yoga client yesterday, she said, oh, I'm so happy that Richard lets me be myself and lets me enjoy what I want to enjoy. And Richard doesn't hold on to her. They went on a lovely vacation, and they had, went to Hawaii, and that was great. But real world time is she does her writing club, she does her yoga, she does her workout, she does her whatever it is she wants to do. And he has to go, okay, that's it.
That's great. That's really great.
That's healthy.
I think it's healthy. So, and just an observation, my husband, I'm his 3rd wife, and we got married, I think he was on the verge of 50, I don't know, something like that. And I got married for the first time at 39 to him. And he tells me we have a pretty good relationship, one like you described, where I can do my thing and he can do his thing. We have a 3-year-old daughter, which, complicates stuff sometimes. But, And my husband tells me a lot that he feels like only now is he mature enough to be in a healthy relationship, or he's just mature enough to be in a relationship, so we have a pretty healthy one. And he, unfortunately, he feels like only now is he mature enough to be a father. He has two older children in their 20s. So it's just interesting, you know, how you're talking about getting married older, or you encourage your sons to wait till they were 30, and then about each of us being in process constantly.
I think that mutual respect and admiration for the good things, gratitude for a relationship. A lot of, you know, there are a lot of single women in LA who are searching for a relationship with a mature and grown-up man, and is not finding it. And the women are usually much more mature than the men, and this dating age here, this millennial age, and it's very, very difficult. So, you know, whoever is married, whoever has a relationship, gratitude, gratitude, gratitude for every day of your life that you get to experience a coupling and planning, and I think it's really important. I mean, I'm still looking. I would still be open to a relationship, even at my advanced age. I think it would be
And can you tell everybody how old you are?
I'm 71 as of last week.
Happy birthday, and you look amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. But I just think that it's nice, you know, but if you can make it work, and if you can respect and admire each other for the talents and the skills that you have, I'm all about that. I'm not about, you know, if you have that energy that's positive, that's going back and forth with each other, a lot of times these relationships you get in your office, they've already been, they're toxic. Yeah. And they poisoned the well a long, long time ago. The regrets and the recriminations, that's difficult to wade through. And then the punishment. I'm going to punish you. I'm going to blame you. You did this to me. You're in my house. Blah, blah, blah. It is, and then it gets so devastating for everybody, including the attorney.
Yes.
And you can't work with them. So it's about being sensible about separating. That separation is a gift. It's not a negative. If you think it's a negative, turn it into a positive. That means you start the rest of your life the way you want to start the rest of your life. Don't be scared. If you don't know enough about yourself, learn it.
Okay. So what if somebody says, well, I don't want to start the rest of my life without her or without him? I mean, that's clearly codependent, but how can you help that person shift? I mean, what can you say to them to help them shift to thinking about, well, I guess
themselves, putting themselves first? Yeah. Well, she's so used to, or he's so used to putting the other person ahead of them that it's a difficult separation. It's like taking, you know, getting rid of the needle in heroin, or getting rid of the powder in coke, or, you know, it's like you've got to separate from that drug, and you have to go through some therapy. And I would say go on a women's retreat. One of my clients just came back from a 3-day women's retreat where it was all about meditation and mindfulness and wonderful speakers, and you know, you are the beginning of the rest of your life, and you have to have that. You have to transform the mental and the physical and the spiritual. You can't do it without some sort of spiritual context, which would be positive energy, or seeing the light all the time instead of the darkness. I know these are metaphors, but they're meaningful metaphors to people.
Okay. So when you say spiritual, and I'm not opposed to religion or going to church, but you don't necessarily mean start going to church, but that could be something that a person does.
Well, it could be, but dogma's not the answer. Dogma's just another drug. Dogmas, you know, the church and the beliefs and the following is just another drug. If you go into it with, I want to be in a community of like-minded people that, you know, believe in prayer and good works. If it's good works, yeah, you know, I'll volunteer for some organization on that level. But not that God will save them, because God's not going to save them. They have to look into themselves. That's a spiritual, looking into themselves and finding the God or the energy or the universe within themselves. Because if you know, and I have to say this, Wendy, but we operate on fear. All of us operate on fear. The fear of loss, the fear of losing that man or woman, the fear that I can't get through my life without. And that's an unrealistic fear, because you still are you still have your skills, you still have your talents, and you still have abundance.
Does this fear ever... Go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I always quote this because I think it's brilliant. The Buddhists say, we are born with all the happiness we will ever need in our entire lives, and then we screw it up. We self-sabotage. Humans are big on self-sabotaging.
Yes.
And the self-sabotaging statement to the husband, let's say the wife says, but I can't live without you, I can't go on without you, that's self-sabotage. Really, that's not the case.
It's disempowering to her.
Yeah, exactly.
Does this fear ever go away? Will it ever go away for any of us, or is it always going to be there? Is that just part of the human, being a human?
No, it can go away.
Can it?
I believe it can go away, right. I remember when I first started yoga, I had fear of death. I was raised a Catholic, and it's always about death and dying, and if you're going to go to heaven or hell,
yeah,
or maybe purgatory. And I was always just scared. And I was 13 years in this cult, and I carried it with me until I was 50. No, I'm sorry. I started yoga in about my early 50s, about 52, and it took quite a while for me to understand that I read the Tibetan book of living and dying, and I realized that fear of death was, it's part of life. Death is a part of life. So how can you fear it? It's just another transformative moment. And I lost my fear of death. And change, I've always done change. So the fear of change doesn't bother me. I like being surprised. I like being delighted by what's going to come up. Moving to a new city. At my advanced age, I probably should be going to a senior center. But instead of a senior center and playing bocce ball, I've decided I was going to go to the hippest city in the country where my son lives and 2 of my grandchildren, and listen to great country western music and dance.
So where's that?
Austin, Texas.
For anybody out there who wants to...
Austin, Texas, but don't come because it's getting crowded. All of California is moving there.
So, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Most people are Californians who move there.
I didn't know that. We're going to have to visit Austin. I didn't realize it was such a hip city.
Oh, it's great. It's really fun. And, you know, I have family there. So one of my decisions was I have a son in Las Vegas and I have a son in Austin. All right. Now, that's an easy pick. I think I'll go to Austin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about being surprised and being delighted. What role does that play in letting go, in surrendering? How do they mix? How do they intertwine with one another?
That's a good question, Wendy.
Thank you.
They've all been good, but this one is a good one. This feels like a tongue twister or a Rubik's Cube. Can you have one without the other? When you let go, you make a positive choice to surrender to what is in the moment. Now. What is now? Now I'm moving. I'm surrendering to it. And the surprise is what happens after I surrender? What happens after I sign the divorce papers and I say to my best friend or my mother or my father or whoever or my children, and I say, this is the first day of my new life. And I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen? But it's going to be awesome. And we're going to have fun doing it. Because why make it miserable? Why, start drinking? Or why misbehave? Why don't you just embrace the energy that's in front of you, the new energy that's in front of you? So
a person, I'm guessing, can do this for any event that happens in their life that they might perceive as traumatic. For example, losing a job or losing a loved one to death. Can they do this for anything?
Yes, for anything. Absolutely for anything. I've just been teaching yoga at UCLA and meditation for the past 12 years, yoga meditation teacher in the fitness department. I bonded with all of these students, and they kept leaving me and going off, right, or leaving the program. Yeah. And they are onto their lives, they're onto the next step, and I watch with joy as each one of them took their steps out of the university and out of the cocoon. And then one day in September, I walked out and I said, it's time to go. I have done my business. I have done my role. I have touched people. They have become devoted yogis. There's nothing more I can teach them. The next teacher will teach them something else. And I walked out feeling, wow, and not worried about what I'm going to do. Not worried about, oh, I got to teach a yoga class. And then all of a sudden, private students started to call me and say, can you teach me? Can you teach me? And all of a sudden, I'm back teaching yoga privately. and it's like when I go to Austin, I told the woman who manages my apartment complex, I said, do you guys want some yoga and meditation in the building? Surprise. I let go. Surprise.
That's beautiful. And everything you just said, it gave me chills, and it spoke to me. I know it's going to speak to somebody who listens to this podcast, and he knows who he is, who really needs to hear what you have to say about letting go and just knowing when it's time. So I think
one other thing, somebody asked me a question the other day that was really interesting, and I was talking about my significant other who's gone and who was the love of my life and my soulmate. And I can say that without feeling icky about it, because he was an unusual man, and he's gone now. He passed, and someone said, well, the law. How do you deal with that loss? How do you deal? Because he had just lost his wife and his soulmate, and how do you deal with it? And I said, oh, that spirit's always with me. I don't have to deal with anything. He's there every single day of my life, cheering me on, saying, go to Texas, do what you do, go to teach yoga. Follow your path. Follow the path. The path is your truth. And if you know what your truth is, if you know what your skill is, you know where your abundance is, then you don't have to miss. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to throw yourself a pity party every day, because that doesn't enter into your journey.
That is beautiful. You are a gem. You're amazing. So it's about time to wrap up, Joan, and if somebody who listens to this podcast wants to hear more about you or read your book, can you just tell them how they can find you and what the book is about, because we haven't even talked about it.
All right. Well, in my 60s, beginning of my 60s, I guess I was like 63 or something, I all of a sudden became present, really present. I said, oh my goodness, I'm living my 60s, and it feels like I'm not. But it was my 60s, and things were changing rapidly in my life. My adult children were married. I had grandchildren. I had lost a significant other. I was dating on the internet. So I wrote a book called 60, Sex, and Tango, Confessions of a Beatnik Boomer, because I'm technically a beatnik, and I was born and raised in San Francisco. And, of course, I'm a boomer, which is where I identify with. I don't identify with the war. So I wrote this book. It's very funny. It's got funny chapter titles, but it's about real life, and it's about facing a lot of experiences. People tell me, oh, I had that, oh, I had that. And because I was a screenwriter, I do a lot of it in dialogue form. Yeah. So it reads like a screenplay. And then I talk about, at the end, the tango is a metaphor for meditation and for being calm and resourceful and getting into yourself. I talk about sex. I talk about senior sex. In fact, I even did a stand-up comedy routine about senior sex in a comedy store.
Oh, that's cool.
Because you have to have a sense of humor about it. There's no other way but to have a sense of humor about sex. And sex is still important. And intimacy is very important. So, and the 60 is all my crazy adventures as I got through my 60s. So my website is www.joanfrances, with an E, not an I, Joan Frances Moran, MORAN.com. And I'm a keynote speaker, so it's really up there for my speaking topics. But the book is on there if you look. There are videos. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about my mind-fueled tools for life renewal. And, it's out there. It's fun. And it's joyful.
Oh. Well, thank you. So, and I will include all of the links that you just shared on the show notes for this podcast episode. And so if you want to connect with Joan or see more of what she's about, then you can find her there. And thank you so much, Joan.
No, Wendy, thank you so much. Really, you're a delightful, delightful interviewer. It was great.
Oh, thank you. So that's going to do it for this episode of
Yeah.
the Family Law Insider. Thanks for joining us, and remember, we're on your side when it matters most. I'll see you next time.